Okay, welcome to week 4. At the top of the home page, we have a to-do list as usual. We're going to continue on with a new module in Unit 1 and continue working on old modules in Unit 2, the logic unit, and Module 4.2, cognitive biases. So Unit 1, if we scroll down here, all the green units, this is the unit where we're focusing on being able to analyze and understand arguments in detail and nuance. So we started just with the definition of what an argument is. We started working last week on the language of argument, being able to identify what writers or speakers do to signal to their audience what the conclusion is and what reasons are. That's a kind of relationship between claims. And also how they use assuring, guarding, and discounting language to influence or in some way control the way their audience interacts with what they're saying. This week we're going to begin a new module called Implicature. It's a fancy jargon word, but the core message here is that communication is complicated and interesting, and it goes beyond what the words we say literally mean. In my welcome to week 4 announcement, I'm going to include a link to Key and Peele's famous text message sketch as an example of how we communicate so much more than just what we've literally said. And so that's being aware of these complex, nuanced features of communication is helpful for being able to recognize and understand what other people are saying and how they are communicating it. Because not only do we want to be able to understand the arguments that are coming at us, we also want to be able to control how other people interpret what we're saying, so that way we can communicate what we really want to communicate and do it well, right? So that's the point, the basic message of Module 4 of Unit 1 is that there are features of conversational contexts and underlying sort of rules of conversation that we follow in order to understand one another. And all of that goes beyond what words literally mean. And then next week we're going to have your Arguments 1 quiz based on modules 1 through 4 of Unit 1 Understanding Arguments. So definitely, if you haven't already, take a look at the practice quiz. The best way to practice is to actually take the quiz as if it's a quiz. Sit down, do it all at once, and then see how you did, and then study strategically based on how you did on a real attempt at a quiz. Okay, so that's your first module, Implicature. Let's actually take a moment to look up sort of what you're going to do in it. So there is a text. It's not terribly long, so I recommend reading it, which I think I've given you instructions to do. And there are handouts and there are videos. The handouts are not something you'll have to turn in, but they are created to go with these videos, which, as you can see here, pause for questions. You don't have to answer any of the questions as you complete the videos. They're pauses to connect with the handout so you can sort of more slowly take in and identify what the most important pieces you're supposed to be getting from these videos are. So open up a handout. It's going to ask you to make a copy of it as a Google Doc. So open that up and then take notes as you watch the video, or at least answer stuff in your head. And the first 2 videos are the essential ones. The second 2 are interesting and valuable to watch, but you don't need to take notes on them. Okay, next we have translations. So again, we're continuing on. If you follow this link or this one down here, any of these, they all go to the same place, which is the translations module. Okay, so we're in week 4. If you're caught up, follow the instructions for week 4. Again, I recommend you take a look at the practice quiz early on so you know what to expect. And once you've actually maybe completed a little bit of this week and next week's material, sit down and take the practice quiz as if it's a real quiz. It's the #1 way you can study and test your understanding and skill level. Okay, so the translations module is one where there's more than one good way to learn the concepts and skills or to be introduced to them. If you like reading a text, that's one option, but you can alternatively watch the lecture videos, or you could potentially just go straight to the practice exercises and see if you get it. If you do, maybe you don't need some, you can kind of sort of just figure it out by practicing and looking at the solutions as you go. Or you'll realize, no, I do need some instruction on this, and choose the text or the lecture or both. The text is, I think, good. I wrote it, but I could see wanting to learn this material not by reading it. So for week 4 this week, we're trying to focus on objective 2 up here. Last week, you learned the definitions of atomic versus compound statements and how to identify the atomic statements within compound statements and the operators that are used to create compound statements. And so now we're going to start translating statements from English into symbolic notation, where what we're capturing is just those things that matter to whether or not statements are true or false. So last week, these were the 2 practice worksheets, or 6 through 9 in the packet, and the ones relevant to this week are probably these 3. If you really want to start at the super basic beginning, you might start with this one and then this one, where you do one operator at a time. Or if you want to start in the easier section, where you've got sort of all 4 together, but they're easier examples, maybe you start here. And if you're getting it, skip these ones. And if you start here and you're not getting it, maybe go back and do the more targeted intro ones here. Some people just take to this and get it immediately, and some people feel super confused right away. In part, the confusion is because a lot of stuff looks new. It's not something you've done before, and there's symbols, and it looks like math. And if you have math fear, you're immediately like, it's math. I didn't know I signed up for math. But with a bit of practice, you might find it's not too terrible. So if you are hitting like an initial wall of, I don't get anything, you might reach out for help early on this. Don't forget I have office hours. I have office hours where you can just come to my drop-in on the Zoom link on Tuesdays. It's on the homepage. I'm just there. You click the link. I'm there. Or send me a message and we can meet some other way, either non-Zoom or perhaps at a different time. So definitely get over the initial hump of this is unfamiliar and it looks like math by reaching out for help. Okay, so that's my advice for the translations stuff. And then finally, let's take a super quick look at the cognitive biases stuff. So we're continuing on again. This is your 3rd week with this material. So before, we were just introducing the idea that we have these sort of like 2 systems of thought, fast and slow. And in week 3, we introduced the 8 biases just to get the definitions on the board and to get some basic illustrative examples under your belt. Now we're going to start looking each week at a couple in more depth and practicing being able to do passage analysis exercises. And we'll add 2 new ones each week. So for our first week, we're doing confirmation bias and availability heuristic. So you should definitely look at the text and review all of the materials in the text here, and also the passage analysis guide and the homework that goes with this. Notice that there are 2 of them. One is auto-graded. You'll get immediate feedback. You can redo it 3 times as usual. And one is a passage analysis homework. It's short, but it's one where you only get 1 attempt because it is a hand-graded one. So here's what it looks like. There's an example of the passage analysis grading criteria and a sample of applying it to a passage. There's a guided one where you fill in the pieces that would be required for a complete answer, and then there's a try it yourself. So that's what to expect on this. It's pretty short. It's just your first one, and we're just getting the expectations for what exactly a passage analysis question and what's a complete answer is supposed to look like. And then, as usual, complete your week 4, not week 3. Oh, that's because I'm not on the homepage. Thought I had a typo. Your week 4 check-in, good. And as usual, if you go to the modules page, week 4, like the other weeks, is completely laid out here so that you can see what you've done and what you haven't. Some general tips for navigating Canvas. FYI, you can hide previous stuff and it'll remember what you've hidden. So if you're definitely done with something, you don't have to do so much darn scrolling. The other thing I want to introduce you to is a new feature in the gradebook. So this is what it looked like before. This is all still here, all the same. And you can see sort of things totaled down here. You can adjust whether things are graded calculate based on graded assignments. So if you're like a week behind and haven't submitted stuff, your grade is artificially high perhaps. But here's a new tab in the Grade Center. It's called Learning Mastery. All of the homeworks and quizzes that you complete have, like, all of the questions are connected to a learning objective. And so as you're completing various homeworks, it'll keep track of which objectives you're doing well on and which ones you aren't. So if you, I haven't, as my practice student, answered all this stuff, but I did do a couple, and you can, unfortunately, the information when you hover over it doesn't tell you what the objective is. I'm trying to figure out how to make this more readable, but the objectives are identical to the ones in the module. So if you see, let's say yours is 3 arguments is something you're really struggling with, that refers to, in Unit 1, Mod 1 arguments, if you go open up any given module, you'll see there are objectives here, and objective 3 is being able to distinguish between statements and arguments. And so you might strategically go to practice exercises on that or reach out for help with that. So you can get a sense by looking at that learning now I forgot what it was called, Mastery gradebook, which of these objectives you're struggling the most with, so you can do strategic studying. Okay, that is everything for week 4. I look forward to your week 4 check-in. Have a wonderful and hopefully relaxing Labor Day weekend.